Welcome to the Rock Newman Show.
It's the Rock Newman Show.
Welcome back to the last segment of today's Rock Newman Show, Saturday, July the 20th, 2013. I am Rock Newman. I have been just absolutely flattered and honored to have had my co-host here this hour, Dr. Julianne Malveaux. We're talking all things Trayvon Martin, and we dubbed actually today the Rock and the Doc Show. In studio at the table with us here is Mr. Leo Alexander. Leo is a former TV personality in Mobile, Alabama, New Orleans, and more recently in Washington, D.C. at NBC News. And he is a mayoral candidate. Leo Alexander,
a
former mayoral candidate. And, you know, as I watched the 2010 mayoral race, Leo Alexander was in it and didn't have quite the name recognition as some of the others who were in that race. But repeatedly, I would see him show up at forums, coming with some very, what I thought were solid ideas for the citizens of Washington, D.C. I've been very impressed with many of the positions that you've taken, and we're Facebook friends.
That's right.
And
most importantly.
and I see his posts on Facebook. They are very, very popular. They are thought-provoking, very, very thought-provoking, oftentimes controversial. And so Leo, after the mayor's race, has stayed very engaged in the community, very engaged with politics and social issues. So welcome to the Rock Newman Show.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here also with Doctor here.
And obviously the Trayvon Martin case has aroused your passions in multiple ways, in terms of your having and suggesting that there be introspection, that there be real introspection by all elements of the community, white, black, and otherwise.
Absolutely.
Part of what you've talked about was what you thought was the inherent racism that was attached to this case and elements of race. Mm-hmm. And you also have been a strong proponent of pretty much a blanket boycott of all things Florida.
Yes.
We want to talk about all of that today.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you again for inviting me here to speak with both of you and your audience out worldwide. I want to tell you that my brother over in Copenhagen, Denmark, and his family are watching right now, and they happen to be listening to your last guest, and he called me while I was sitting out here in your audience and said, how many black folks are like that? I said, quite a few, unfortunately.
Well, actually, the correct answer would be not many.
All right.
Thank God.
Okay. But yeah, because of this, first of all, I want to give a shout out to our president for the comments that he said yesterday. He spoke to the pain, the visceral pain, and the history behind it, because we all expected justice. But when the verdict happened, it was like a scab had just been ripped off a wound that never was healed. Yeah. And that's why you saw the response from our community of anger and feeling of betrayal, of not feeling like the American dream will ever attain to us. Yeah. So I started thinking then. I started the conversations with my Facebook friends, and we went back and forth, and my first call was to not be violent. Let's not burn down our neighborhoods. Let's think about what we do next. Now that we have the president coming out, laying out how it feels to be an African American.
Leo, please pardon me.
Sure.
Let me just stop right there. Stop you there.
Okay.
And touch on something. The need for you to make that suggestion and recommendation of let's not be violent, let's not burn down our neighborhoods. You know, I find it somewhat insidious in newspaper reports and advisories and, you know, all of the networks talking about the potential for rioting based on that.
And, you know, even more than that, I mean, part of the challenge here is that we've come a long way since the O.J. case.
Yeah. And
where
since 68.
Exactly. When we did not own our neighborhoods. It's more likely for us to own our neighborhoods now, not to justify any of the uprisings that occurred, and I use the word uprisings, not riots, the uprisings that occurred during that time period, but to basically look at the fact that things have changed. We embrace that change. It is racist and it is narrow to suggest that people of African descent don't know how to do anything but take it to the streets. Right. And I know some of the suggestions you've made show that we can do more than take it to the streets.
Absolutely.
And so we have to be clear about adopting the language of the oppressor. Yeah. And that's what, when people start talking about we have more extra police on because these people are going to riot, we're not animals. I mean, how dare they? Right. You know, what would they have done if Zimmerman were found guilty? Would they have rioted?
Right, right, and it was, and that was never said.
Exactly.
And therein is a big difference, and it's a big difference that I hope that from what we do at this table and this microphone, it shows that difference and hopefully sensitizes people to those differences and those perceptions. I'm sorry, Leo.
No, that's quite all right.
Continue.
But we have to also be conscious of the fact that these uprisings, this action by people who feel powerless in a sense, have happened in our history.
Sure.
I mean, the Rodney King verdict, for instance, it has happened. So
that was 20 years ago, Leo.
No, I understand that. But the situations within our community haven't improved that much over 20 years. You still have a large segment of our community who are disenfranchised and feel powerless in a sense. And when you have these uprisings, that's their voice. That's what they're speaking. That's an action by them. So what I was saying on Facebook was, okay, now that we have the president coming out and articulating the pain and what the history behind the pain, now we also have Eric Holder, our Attorney General, saying that we're not going to release the gun back to Mr. Zimmerman because we want to hold that as evidence in a potential case by the U.S. Justice Department. Okay, that's great. Now what are we going to do as a community, black people? So what I'm speaking of is not only to our community, but also white people, because I've got a lot of white folks who are my Facebook friends who've also chimed in as to their outrage on the verdict as well. Mm-hmm. So I said, okay, this is what we do. We've got to hit them in a way that they will feel it. Marches, speeches don't work. I was born in Brooklyn, but I was raised in Mobile, Alabama, the Deep South. And one thing I learned was, you know, racism is expensive. And they learned that in Montgomery, Alabama during the bus boycott. The white city fathers realized after a year they couldn't afford to be racist any longer. They had to allow the blacks to sit wherever they wanted to sit. Mm-hmm. So they ended the boycott.
Couldn't afford to practice
They couldn't, exactly.
Well, they couldn't afford to keep the bus system afloat.
Exactly. Right. So we pulled back the money. Mm-hmm. So what are we going to do to Florida? I did a little research before coming on your show, and I realized that tourism is a huge industry for the state of Florida. Orange juice is a multi-billion-dollar industry in the state of Florida. So we're going to hit them at both places. We're going to cancel our conventions, we're going to cancel our vacations, and we're not going to South Beach. There's several other beaches around the country to go to. We're going to do that immediately. That's what I'm calling for, at least, and I'd love for everyone else to jump on board.
Do you know
got Stevie Wonder already saying he won't perform down there, so that's wonderful.
You know if that product, the Simply Orange, is that a Florida product?
No, I don't know that.
That's Simply Orange and mango. Man, that's some serious.
Yeah, but you're going to have to give it up, Brett. You're going to have to give it up.
And that limeade.
Yeah. But you're going to have to give it up.
But just
okay,
a minute,
all
Leo.
right. Okay, we love Trayvon. We'll give it up.
Okay.
Let me ask you a question, though. I mean, any kind of economic action we can take is good, as well as any kind of marching and protest. But Florida has a certain percentage of African-American people who live there. Have you thought through what those boycotts mean to those black people who live there? Because we don't want to punish an African-American person who lives in Florida.
You're absolutely right. But here's the deal. In every protest, there must be personal sacrifice. During the Montgomery bus boycott, people had to chip in together and create carpools. People had to walk. People had to sacrifice. You cannot have a protest and expect things to change if everybody wants to be comfortable.
Yeah.
I'm not dealing with discomfort, but let me say that I'm a Floridian.
People won't be affected. Of course they will be affected.
Well, let's say I'm a Floridian who picks oranges, which puts you at the bottom of the income distribution. You do not make a lot of money picking oranges. So I'm a Floridian who picks oranges. This boycott is successful. Now I'm a Floridian who is jobless. Unless people are prepared, and I haven't weighed in on this either way. I'm just thinking through, as an economist, what this means to individuals and individual families. So you're the Floridian who picks oranges.
$10 billion industry. Go ahead.
So that $10 billion industry includes African-American employees.
I'm sure.
And from your perspective, what does that mean?
Some of them will have to find other jobs. Some of them will have to either get on the safety net that the state provides.
And I would also say in support of what you're saying, if in fact there was that kind of mass action,
yes,
that would be a temporary situation.
Yes.
And then the orange growers in Florida would have a greater degree of respect for the community.
Absolutely.
And perhaps those people can come back under better conditions and maybe with higher wages.
That's exactly what
that's
I
a potential.
There you go.
That's a potential, again.
Yeah.
No, I understand that.
And I would like to hear from our Florida brothers and sisters, a Florida branch of the NAACP, and folks like that before any action like this were taken, just so folks can talk about, we support this, we don't support this. One of the things we know about the anti-apartheid boycotts and the movement to have companies doing business in South Africa withdraw.
To divest,
is that the South Africans said themselves, we want this system to be ungovernable. And when you start pulling money out, it was ungovernable. The African National Congress said, we don't care if we're hurt because this is a greater good.
It's a bigger picture.
That's right.
But again, that's a question we have to ask Black Floridians.
They bought into the sacrifice that I was talking about.
Yeah.
So in the other industry that I wanted to hit was tourism. It's a $70 billion industry. It's the second largest industry in the U.S. as far as tourism of all the states in the country. California is number one. But the point is, Disney, we have to stop going there. And then I looked on a couple of our brothers' websites that I'll mention. Reverend Al has a convention coming up in Miami next month, and Brother Tom Joyner has a convention coming up in around Labor Day in Orlando. These conventions must be canceled, because they have to understand we are very serious. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on, as far as boycott is concerned, being a child of the South, I understand how important college football is in that community.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if we remove our money...
That cannot be overstated.
Exactly. Yeah. If you remove your money, first of all, and you've got President Obama and Eric Holder taking care of the political and criminal side of it, then we have to also remove our talent. And what I mean by that is you cannot, if you have a child that's in high school being recruited by a school in Florida, you cannot let him sign with that school. Let him sign with any other school in the SEC, ACC, or any other conference except Florida schools. They cannot win without black talent, and you know this, Rock. So the point is that if we cut off the talent, we cut off the economic support of the system will implode on its own. And then they will see that racism is too expensive. They cannot do it any longer.
And the ultimate effect of these suggestions, is it to change the stand your ground law? What are you looking for the impact to be?
Not only, we're going to make an example out of the state of Florida. We're going to change the law there. But there are roughly 24 other states that also have the same law. Mm-hmm. So what we're going to do is use the Florida blueprint, all right? Make an example and say, you're next. Whether it's Alabama, Kentucky, or wherever we're talking about, you're next. Mm-hmm. And they will voluntarily come to the table and say, okay, we're going to change this.
Leo, when you say we, who are you talking about?
I'm talking about not only...
What are you talking about?
No. Unfortunately, I'm not. I'm just talking about black people, period. We have a voice. We don't need to wait on brothers in the NAACP or brothers in the National Action Network or Rainbow Coalition. We can do this ourselves. If the Arab brothers started their Arab Spring on Facebook, why can't we start our boycott on Facebook?
Yeah. Well, and, I mean, you're talking about something that I think, frankly, is noble and a lofty goal. It is also about mass mobilization.
That's right.
And mass mobilization is, if you go back to Marcus Garvey, we got to talk about some very, very serious fundamental infrastructure and organizing. Right. But you know what? In 2013, I would suggest that we should be able to accomplish that again, with Facebook and
That's
Twitter
right.
and
Quickly.
cell phone and on all the rest.
Quickly.
You know, I mean, the 1963 March on Washington was put together sans
By
cell phone,
word-
sans all,
Word of
all
mouth,
this social
word of mouth,
social
word
media.
of churches, and
Yeah.
all those kind
That's
of
it.
things. So it is very possible to look at any number of types of actions in response to this particular case. My argument, however, would be that these things have to be very carefully thought
Vetted,
out,
yeah.
and they have to be sustainable, which is why, Rock, we talked earlier about, I won't say an idea I had, because a friend of mine, Cheryl Poinsett Brown, lifted it up to me yesterday. We were talking about Trayvon being 17 years old.
Yes, we want to talk about that in the next segment. We're going to go
Okay.
to a quick break, and we've got to come back. That's a very important element. Be back in a moment at the Rock Newman Show at Busboys and Poets in Washington, D.C.
My baby drives a pro handcuff.
The weekend is here, and no matter what the weather's like outside, you'll find the deals inside here in the beautiful showroom of the all-new Pohanka Hyundai in Capitol Heights during their giant Markdown Madness sale.
Smart shoppers know that every new Hyundai in Pohanka comes with Hyundai Assurance and America's best 10-year, 100,000-mile powertrain warranty. But why don't you tell them about the markdown sale, Joe?
I'll be happy to, Kim. Folks, shop around on the web, and you'll see lease payments on a new 2013 Elantra GLS at $179 a month. Today at Pohanka Hyundai, $99 a month. That's right, a $99 payment on a brand new Elantra.
And $89 a month on a new 2013 Accent GLS Automatic. How do they do it, Joe?
It must be the volume, Kim. A brand new building, hundreds of new Hyundais, and Pohanka's low payment and easy credit programs are designed to get everybody driving. But you have to get here today. Rush to the giant Markdown Madness sale at exit 13 off the Capitol Beltway.
Pohanka Hyundai, king of the Beltway. All financing for a limited term on approved HMF credit.
My baby drives a pro handcuff.
Julianne Malveaux in studio is Leo Alexander, former newsman with multiple stations around the country and former mayoral candidate for Washington, D.C. Leo is here and was talking about advocating how to make an economic impact through some forms of boycott and mass mobilization on Florida and other states. Ultimately, that would lead to other states that have what may be discriminatory laws, laws that don't value the lives of folks in the African American community having a real impact. It's a noble effort. Obviously, it's a very large undertaking. One of the things I want to go talk about before we get to your point that you were making before we left was I had a dear friend in Florida to send me an email, and it had 17 rules for black men, young black men, to survive. And it had to do not run in public, not have anything in your hand. When the police stop you, be very that sort of thing. You know, I bring that up because it is a form, I would suggest, of stress.
Oh, yeah.
That African American parents have. And it is a dynamic that young African American men have to deal with out of necessity. And parents have to be concerned that they have to still today, we talk about the progress that we've made or even lack thereof. And when you feel a need, when you feel a sense of obligation, like Eric Holder talked about, that he has a son and he had to have today the conversation with his son that his father had with him some 35 or 40 years ago. That's a tough thing to deal with. That is a level of stress that I think in President Obama's speech yesterday, he was trying to communicate. You know, he had such a tough job to do, but I think he did the best that he could, because he was, again, as described by one writer, trying to explain black Americans to white Americans, and that ain't an easy job. Well, in terms of things to do, I bring out this gentleman, Donald Watkins is his name. He's originally from Alabama, as a matter of fact. His dad was president of Alabama State for a year, Dr. Watkins.
Okay.
He talked about what Dr. Watkins' rules of survival. And there happened to be 17 of them. Of course, Trayvon Martin was 17 years old. And Julianne, you've talked just briefly, and I certainly would like for you to elaborate on that number 17 and how it applies as we talk about all things Trayvon.
Well, I don't want the momentum that we have now to be swallowed. This is not about a one-time thing. As both of you have said, we have laws on books in every state that discriminate against young black men and against African-American people in general. So I was talking to a good friend last evening, Cheryl Poinsett Brown, who lives in Atlanta. She is the mom of my godchild, who is 16. And so we're constantly concerned. He already knows, the po-po come. Just put your hands up. Drop whatever you have, put your hands up, because you don't want to get shot. You want to make it clear that you don't have a weapon.
I want to say to those that are listening and to our white brothers and sisters, hear this. Hear this. This woman told her godchild, her son,
my godchild,
if the po-po comes, just put your hands up. You know, I mean, think about what that means and the message that is sending, that is sending out of necessity, because the thing to do is you're in survival mode then.
Well, precisely because of what my nephews have learned from their interactions with the police are that the police are not their friend. Now, you want people to think the police are your friend. They teach it in school. If something bad happens, you go find a policeman.
Yeah, they call it officer friendly.
Yeah, well, officer unfriendly in the African American community. Right. But the 1717 idea is that it was Trayvon Martin was 17 years old. So on the 17th of every month, for as long as we need to, we want people to come out in their own communities, whether it's 10 people, 17 people, 170 people, but all over the country, to have the 1717 movement. Because we can't forget Trayvon Martin. I mean, what tends to happen with us is we treat race relations like a football game.
Yeah.
Football season, in the basketball season, but so you forgot what happened during football season. And what we have to say is that there is a concerted effort on the 17th of each month for black folks, white folks, whoever has a problem with this, to come out. Now, it's just an idea at this point, but you know, maybe state capitals, but in every city, stand up in front of a Justice Department office or in front of City Hall to say, we won't put up with this. And it really has to be everywhere. We can't just focus on Florida, although boycott ideas work. But we got to focus on any place that one of our children has been shot. We also, in doing that 1717, we pay some attention as well, which is equally important, to the scourge of guns and black-on-black crime. Yeah. See, these people who all of a sudden care about black people, it's like the anti-abortionists who care about children until they get here.
Right.
You know, and then all of a sudden, they don't care. They don't want to have food for those kids. They want you to have the child, but they don't want to support.
Right.
So, you know, we want to say it's not just about one city, one state. It's about our nation and the racism that has riddled our nation continuously. So if we make this seasonal, everybody's mad now. If we make this seasonal, we forget Trayvon Martin. His parents have a foundation, and I think some of these ideas should be run through their foundation, at least so that there is some centralized. Now, Reverend Sharpton is doing something today in 100 cities or more. And again, Leo, I don't think that he went to 100 cities and said, let's do this. I think the idea was put out there, and people are doing it. So again, your idea, I think it's a good idea, but as I said, I would like to get some input from black Floridians. But meanwhile, 1717, remember those numbers.
Yeah.
My motivation is I want to take Trayvon Martin and make him this generation's Emmett Till. And that's, if we can do that effectively, we won't forget. And the reason why we're saying Florida first is because that's where the crime happened and that's where the verdict happened.
Right.
So we can target them. And I have to reiterate, because during the commercial break, I got into a conversation with some of the crew. Yeah. And they talked about, you're absolutely right about football. The reason why that is so important, if we remove our sons out of their football system and let them go to any other city, any other state school around the country, they will feel the impact immediately.
Oh, it would be a collapse.
Immediately.
Football is perhaps beyond religion.
Exactly.
In these places.
You have to understand. No, you really, no, and I'm serious. He's not exaggerating, because it's a culture. It's a way of life. And now that they have gotten used to our black talent, they won't have receivers, they won't have running backs, they won't have linebackers, they won't have defensive backs. If we pull our kids out and say, look, Florida is hostile to African Americans. Our sons, we fear for their safety in the state of Florida. We're going to ask for an exemption from the NCAA to get them moved to other schools. Once we do that, regardless of what we do with orange juice and Disney tourism, that will have the most impact and the fastest impact.
But you know what? NCAA is not likely. I mean, we've seen these governing bodies, for example, when Serena Williams was heckled at Indian Creek, I believe, they said they would not go back there. Then the tennis governing body put Indian Creek on the list of must-play tournaments. They were, both Williams sisters were prepared to take the penalty to not play at Indian Creek. And you see they maintain their ratings. But for a young brother who is attempting to, and I don't mean to be the contrarian here, but I think about these things.
But it's good. It's healthy. It's healthy.
Absolutely.
But with a young brother's football career, 4 years, is what he's going to use as base either for NFL, which we know, of course, the likelihood of NFL, but also
not likely.
What is it, 0.16% or something like that, but also for potentially other kinds of career opportunities. To ask someone to redshirt for a year, and I know so little about football that I just have that one.
No, I understand.
But,
we're not asking. But the other,
but the other pieces you're talking about, the NCAA making an exception. Now, how likely do you think that's going to be?
That's not the position that we should take. We shouldn't take the position of, well, will they let us do it? We shouldn't take that position. The position that I'm advocating is we're going to do it. We're going to force their hand. This is about justice. And if you're an American, you stand for justice. And if a child says, I fear for my safety in this community, I want to move somewhere else, how can you not support that?
Yeah, Leo, here's what I want to ask you, if you've thought this out this far. Okay, let's just say that there is the infrastructure put in place, there's the organization put in place to really do this kind of mass mobilization. Now, it's a noble effort, but it's a huge undertaking. It is and we should never, I think, be deterred because it's a big job.
Yes.
Okay.
But it's only one state, though, Rock.
I know. I understand.
Let's keep it in mind.
And so,
one state.
And so, okay, so if these things were to be done,
yes,
and they were met with success, that black families would realize we need to make the sacrifice we might not be able to work in the orange groves for a little bit, or our child might not go to Florida University. We might have to go somewhere else. And so you meet with some success there.
There are plenty of HBCUs in that state, too.
Absolutely.
Yes, there are.
Florida A&M, Bethune-Cookman,
yes,
plenty.
Yes, okay. So you do that to have and to cause Florida, the state of Florida, to do what? To
influence their legislators that racism is too expensive. And it won't be just us advocating for these changes. It will be the lobbyist for the tourism industry, it will be the lobbyist for the juice industry, and it will be the lobbyist for all of the universities. They will go to Tallahassee on our behalf because they understand the impact of what we're doing. They will go there and say, look, you are costing us money. We cannot afford this. That's how you get change. Because marches and speeches, I don't think they really feel that anymore.
Well, I think that marches and speeches are important when they're coordinated. And I don't think that, I mean, from an activist perspective, you want to do two things. One, you want to hit them where it hurts. Right. That's the money piece. But the other thing is you want to keep the eye on a Trayvon type case, which is that's the 1717 idea. I think it's got to be a combination of things. But I have a question for you. You said that Tom Joyner was having a cruise, a meeting. And who else was having a meeting?
Reverend Al is having his National Action Network convention in Miami.
Okay,
and,
so are you prepared to ask these brothers to withdraw their conventions?
Yes, I am. We all have to ask them to do it. It's not just me. I've got sons, and that's why I'm angry about this and have put together this plan. But everyone should be asking Reverend Al and Brother Tom Joyner to move your convention to another state. I mean, look, if they honestly feel the same pain and have the same visceral reaction that we in the 90% of the black community has because of the verdict, we're not asking for too much.
Right.
That's the bottom line.
Let me ask you, Leo, growing up in Mobile, Alabama.
Yes.
Did you have the kind of tutelage or the kind of suggestion from your parents, grandparents, whoever, you were reared by, that Donald Watkins had in terms of a survival mode, one, and two, you have black boys today. Do you feel a need to share those kinds of survival skills with them today?
Yes, and to answer, it's a two-part question.
Yes.
My background. My mother, she was a revolutionary back in the 60s before I even knew what the term was. She moved her family of three sons, I'm the youngest of three sons, to Copenhagen, Denmark during the height of the Vietnam movement because she didn't want to sacrifice her sons to the war.
Really?
Yes. So that's the household I grew up in.
Wow.
You understand?
Wow.
So when we got to Alabama in '72, that's her hometown.
Yeah.
I was prepared for her hometown. But we approached it as, she made sure that we were educated, we read all the time, and she gave us the historical background of what it means to be a black male in the South. And luckily I had other uncles, the supporting exterior family, to chip in as well. Right. So when you talk now, the other question about how about my sons? I've got a son at that university that you mentioned earlier, Alabama State University. Right. He will be graduating this year, Corey. And it's very important that we've had these conversations. And my other sons, they're not old enough, but we're going to have these conversations. And you feel this. There is a strain that's put on black people, especially black men, and I'm not going to say that sisters don't feel it because they have to rear black men as well, but the oppression that you feel knowing that there's 17 rules of survival, those are legitimate rules.
Yeah.
That's real.
Yeah.
So there is a stress and there is a pain that's put on you, and that's the reason why I would suspect that we suffer from more high blood pressure and hypertension than anybody else.
And different life expectancies. You know, Paul Lawrence Dunbar, we wear the mask that grins and lies, that hides our teeth, our cheeks rather, and shades our eyes. We wear the mask. I mean, and we, whether it's black men or black women, are wearing a mask because we have to basically play the game.
Absolutely.
And you have to play the game. And the game for brothers, unfortunately, is put your hands up. The game for sisters is you know, you're Oprah. You're not Oprah as in the millions. That would work for me. But you know, you basically everybody's problem solver. People come and bring their challenges. When they've done these schools, there's a study called the soccer studies that look at the way that children are interacted with in education, in classrooms. And what they find is that when white boys are hyper, they say, oh, they're very interested, they're active, they're interactive. When black boys are hyper, they say they're
disruptive.
Yeah, disruptive, criminal. You know, how could a third grade child be criminal? When white girls jump in, they're often tamped down. Don't jump in. Well, black girls jump in, again, it's a whole different. The only population that's encouraged to jump in is basically white boys. So, you know, this wearing of the mask and the stress of inequality that at some level you must accept or something will happen, you must accept, explains why the life expectancies are different. I mean, I don't know how many brothers who are in my age band, which I won't tell.
29.
Yeah, for the 30th time. But brothers who, you know, who live well, not poor, maybe don't smoke, maybe eat healthily, but are gone at age 50-something. Yeah. And you have to say that a large part of that had to do with the stress. And when you look at these brothers who are professionals, attorneys, you know, physicians, I mean,
whatever they are.
But they're living their life, but they always also have that whole notion of the stress and the racism. And, it, you know, we talk about black women, but we have to be very clear. I think that brothers explode and sisters implode. When you look at the level of obesity in our community, and sisters being more likely to be obese, that's about, you know, emotional feeding. I was talking to a sister friend the other day, and I said, what are you doing? She said, eating the cheesecake. I said, eating a cheesecake? I said, surely you mean a slice of cheesecake. And she said, no, she had some problems at work. She said, so I just went to the freezer and took out a cheesecake. Cheesecake, oh, do me a favor, cut it in half. No, cut it in four. She said, well, I already ate half. I said, okay, I would call that sufficient. You know, but this is, you're feeding the pain, you're feeding the pain. And so we have to be clear that our community lives in almost constant pain, because if it isn't you that it's happened to personally, you know somebody that it's happened to.
Yeah. It's a full-time job being black. We'll be right back.
This is Leprechaun Tim Pohanka from Pohanka Nissan and Pohanka Hyundai. It's hard to be down on your luck when you're Virginia's first choice for new Nissan and Hyundais, but I need to sell 60 cars this week. Right now, I'll pay you big bucks for your good luck. Bring down any good luck charm you've got, and based on the sale price of the car you choose, I'll give you up to $4,777 off any nicer, newer car this week. Today, your lucky penny is worth plenty, up to $4,777 off any nicer, newer car you want. Stop moping and hoping you'll get approved. With my For the People credit approval process, the banks are looking to get lucky and lend to you, even if you've been turned down before. Bring me any good luck charm and I'll give you up to $4,777 off any nicer, newer car today. Hurry, once I get rid of 60 cars, the luck runs out. All offers require bank approval, so call us at 1-800-POHANKA, visit Pohanka Nissan and Pohanka Hyundai on Route 1 in Fredericksburg, or better yet, log on to TimPohankaForThePeople.com. And when we make a deal, I promise it'll be your lucky day. I'm Tim Pohanka, and I'm a leprechaun for the people.
My baby drives a Pohanka.
The weekend is here, and no matter what the weather's like outside, you'll find the deals inside here in the beautiful showroom of the all-new Pohanka Hyundai in Capitol Heights during their giant Markdown Madness sale.
Smart shoppers know that every new Hyundai in Pohanka comes with Hyundai Assurance and America's best 10-year, 100,000-mile powertrain warranty. But why don't you tell them about the markdown sale, Joe?
I'll be happy to, Kim. Folks, shop around on the web, and you'll see lease payments on a new 2013 Elantra GLS at $179 a month. Today at Pohanka Hyundai, $99 a month. That's right, a $99 payment on a brand new Elantra.
And $89 a month on a new 2013 Accent GLS Automatic. How do they do it, Joe?
It must be the volume, Kim. A brand new building, hundreds of new Hyundais, and Pohanka's low payment and easy credit programs are designed to get everybody driving. But you have to get here today. Rush to the giant Markdown Madness sale at exit 13 off the Capitol Beltway.
Pohanka Hyundai, king of the Beltway. All financing for a limited term on approved HMF credit.
My baby drives a Pohanka.
Yeah.
Well, that's the usual.
Welcome back, folks, to the Rock Newman Show. We broadcast live every Saturday from 9 a.m. to noon from the Langston Hughes Room at Busboys and Poets at 14th and V Street, Northwest Washington, D.C. We invite you to come down to be a part of our conversation every Saturday morning. Come down for food for the soul and also some really outstanding food for your tummy. So make plans to join us every Saturday. We're going to have interesting, stimulating, we hope enlightening discussion. Part of what we fully intend to do here with this show is to follow in the footsteps of the vision of the founder of Busboys and Poets, whose mission is to help change the world for the better. One person and one step and one day at a time. We will be searching, and I encourage all of you that are out there in live streaming land around the world, in Copenhagen, Denmark also. Got a dear friend in Antigua that's watching the show, Bermuda. And I would just get punched if I didn't talk about Patricia, who is watching in Norway.
Oh, wow.
I would encourage all of you, when you see something like I talked about earlier today, was the heroism of Tamar Boggs, who saved a little white girl who had been abducted in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And you know what? It doesn't matter if you're white, black, Hispanic, Arabic. It doesn't matter. If you see, I want to encourage you. I want to ask you that if you see something of good, let us know about it. Call us, write us, get us on Facebook, on Twitter, at therocknewmanshow.com, and let us know about that good. We're finding the good, lifting it up, and celebrating it whenever we can.
You know,
each Saturday, we want that to be a part of this show.
Betty Shabazz used to always say, find the good and praise it.
Yes.
And I think that's really important when we think about so much good. Tamar, the young brother, should be on everybody's headline. He should have been interviewed. If we spent a fraction of the time that they gave Robert Zimmerman, who should just keep his mouth shut for the rest of his life.
George.
That Robert is the family spokesperson.
Oh, yeah, yes,
He's been running around, running his mouth.
Yeah.
But we gave a fraction of that time, a minute, to this young brother.
Right.
It really changed perceptions. But the other thing I wanted, years ago, I think it was CBS News interviewed Cliff Alexander and I on a piece about racism. And something I said there, one of my Facebook friends reminded me of, I said, when white people were as outraged about racism as black people were, that's when, we have no more racism. When white people are willing to put themselves on the line as much as we are, then that's when it's over. But there are a whole lot of white folks who don't want to talk about American history.
No.
Talk about the, I always say the greatest act of black economic development was self-emancipation. Yeah. Black people who purchased themselves. And whenever I say that, I get like this feeling in the pit of my stomach, but purchased themselves so that they could be free. That's an act of economic development. Yeah. And, why should you have to purchase yourself in the land of the thief and the home of the slave? I mean, why should you have to buy yourself?
Yeah.
What a terrible contradiction.
Yeah.
Though, we're off point, and I want to stay off point for a minute, because I want to ask Leo about city politics. I mean, we're talking about racial profiling. Do you think there's been profiling in the number of African-American politicians here in D.C. who have been fast-laned to jail?
Without a doubt. I'm very disappointed. First of all, I'm happy to see that our U.S. Attorney, Mr. Machen, is doing what he's doing, cleaning up City Hall. But it's hard for me to think that it's only black people who are corrupt in that building, especially when you had other council members like Mr. Graham, who has been sanctioned for his activities.
Put money in an envelope in his file cabinet, and he gets a slap on the wrist.
Exactly.
Where Kwame...
he just gets reprimanded, basically. And then you have other council members who have relationships that haven't been thoroughly explained with vendors of the city. And I think the main problem at City Hall is, if you're going to be a council member, if you're going to clean up that city, you have to remove their outside employment. You cannot have people making $250,000 working for law firms who represent clients who do business in the district, and then also have that council member work as a city council member on the council. You can't do that, because you can't serve you can't serve two masters. Because if you're being paid hundreds of thousands of dollars by your law firm, and then you're just being paid $125 by the city, who are you most loyal to?
So do you think that the council should have higher salaries?
No, I think the council should have a rule saying no outside employment. I think they're being paid more than enough right now, $125,000 for a part-time job. Are you kidding me? So we should stop it right there. If you're going to really public service is an opportunity for you to serve your community. It's not an opportunity for you to get rich. And that's the problem. The mentality I've seen in a lot of our public servants here in Washington, D.C. is they get in these jobs. They're making $100,000 and some a year, but they're sitting around the table negotiating $1 million contracts with vendors all day. And they think that they are entitled to living that same lifestyle as that vendor across the table. That's the problem. They for some reason, they lose sight of what public service is truly all about. It's about sacrifice.
Reflect on your own experience as a mayoral candidate. You ran, you did not have the endorsements or the support or the dollars that many of the other people had. You actually, I saw you at a couple of debates. You managed yourself very credibly, which is, you could stomp with the big boys in terms of debate, quality, what you had to say, but you didn't have the dollars to really make that much of an impact, except for have some conversation.
Right.
So what's your reflection on that, especially in light of what's happening with the whole shadow campaign and campaign finance in D.C.?
I think the bottom line is we have to remove money out of public politics. And the only way to do that is, I want to clarify, I did get endorsed by the taxi cab union. I must speak up for my cabbies. They were behind me 100%.
Okay.
But the problem is that They don't have the money, or didn't have the money, that the developers have, or the big unions like the teachers union, the police department, fire, the big unions. And when you go into public service, you have to compromise yourself when you meet with all these people, because they all want something for their money and their support. And so what I decided was, if I ever throw my hat in the ring again, I'm going to have to spend my own money so I don't have to compromise. But then I'm also going to have to call on the city to use our district cable TV station to cover all the debates. Because the problem is, when you only have one newspaper like the Washington Post covering the debates, they can dictate the election by only singling it out two opponents. Yeah. And that's what they did. There were 10 other people running for mayor, but they only focused on two, the ones with the money.
I'd like to take this narrow issue, as you said, off point, break it back on point, and broaden it.
Sure.
Meaning, we're talking about all things Trayvon.
Uh-huh.
And you just talked about money in politics and needing to get money out of politics. It seems to me to be a very fundamental point that in order to create fairness, you have to do less, if you will. And what I mean by that is figuring out a way to so drastically limit what candidates and politicians from dog catcher to president have to raise. And
right.
And that way you cut down on the influence of all of these special interests.
Right.
Because the stated goal and role of a politician is to represent the citizens.
That's right.
And much too often, it's taken for granted now that the politicians are simply represent special interests that pay for their elections.
That's exactly
so. What can we as a people do to remove money from political campaigns?
I would like to see, and one thing that happened here in Washington, D.C. Several years ago, the community voted for term limits. But as soon as we voted for term limits, the council turned right around under the leadership of Jack Evans and turned that vote themselves and said, no, we're not going to do it. And they've done it again on this issue of, recently they had an issue where they shot down the vote of the people. So my problem is, how do we remove money from politics? I would like to see just set it at $50,000 and just said you can't raise over $50,000. And then from that $50,000,
you're talking now back to city politics?
That's right. Mm-hmm. That's right. But of course, national politics, you've got public financing. There should be certain things that you can qualify for. If you can yourself raise $50,000, then the public should kick in some matching dollars so you can compete. That's what I would like to see on a national level.
Leo, you had me until you said if you can raise $50,000.
Yeah. No, I understand what you're saying.
I would like to see, if you really want some grassroots action in politics, then Homie the Clown or Bubba the Fool, not really, but should be able to run. And if they can't raise $50,000, there should be some form of campaign finance reform, because you're making the ceiling how much money you could raise. The ceiling ought to be something else. What if you had 10,000 signatures?
That's another way of looking at it. All of that has to be vetted out and find out what's the best way to be able to set up a system that allows representation across the community, not the ones who are just well-connected and well-heeled, but across the community. Because I think we all have a contribution to make. And the reason why I ran 4 years ago, I wasn't delusional. I knew I couldn't compete. But I wanted to bring ideas to the table. I wanted to talk about poverty. I wanted to talk about public safety. I wanted to talk about taxes and how it all plays back to poverty. That's why I ran. So
what is the message? I'm going to ask both of you.
Sure.
We have 3 minutes remaining in the show today. Our future. We look at Trayvon. We talk today about all things Trayvon. What would be your suggestion and encouragement to students like Donnie Brown, who was here earlier, a recent graduate from Howard University, high school students, college students, and young adults? How can they best conduct their lives in a way that would lift Trayvon Martin up and not make his senseless killing be in vain?
let me defer to Leo.
Thank you.
You're our guest.
I was getting ready to listen to you, but okay. I would like to see us really use this opportunity as a national launching point and make Florida, the state of Florida, an example of what we can do if we galvanize and not just, there's so many things that we can do, but let's focus on Florida. Let's cut them off financially. Let's cut them off with our talent. And then they will see that racism, there's no place for it in 2013. That's what we have to do. Galvanize that support.
The words I use, Rock, very often are aluta continua. The struggle,
what's that?
Aluta continua, or the struggle continues. Mm-hmm. So many of our folks think we've made it. You have, although you gutted Title V of the Voting Rights Act, we still have a right to vote that we didn't have 50 years ago. We have accommodations laws. There are very few places that can turn you away, country clubs, but very few places that can actually turn you away because of public accommodations. You see African Americans as CEOs, as college professors, as college presidents. So on paper, we've made a lot of progress. But the struggle continues means these young brothers and sisters have to take the baton and move it. Take the baton and pass it on. I would love to see every college campus have a Trayvon Martin club. Not necessarily club, but a Trayvon Martin movement. So young people can make it clear that they identify with this young man. I like to see us do 1717 for at least a year. So the 17th of every month, we have people outside mobilized. I'd like to see someone come back in 6 months and say, what was the effect of Trayvon Martin? Boycotted Florida. This many demonstrations. These many stand your ground laws have changed. So I like to really see movement. Usually there's a lot of emotion, as we see now, a lot of anger. That's not going to get you anywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, it'll get you somewhere, but I just don't want to see people mouth off.
Yeah.
I'm mad, I'm angry, so do something with it. You take pain and you turn it into power and progress. So I think we're all in pain about this verdict, whether we expected the verdict or not. I mean, it's still like a slap in the face yet again. And we've been slapped enough, but so many of us have decided that slapping is okay, that you can be slapped and then we sort of pick ourselves up and dust ourselves off. And the stoic black person, that's a myth and a stereotype. You look at Sabrina Fulton and you look at her, she was extremely stoic. Yeah. She was a model.
Tremendous grace under intense pressure.
And when she said Trayvon Benjamin Martin, I just want to jump through the TV and say, yes, sister.
Yeah.
But at the same time, her stoicism, great for TV. She's crying somewhere.
Yeah. In the words of Ossie Davis, when he eulogized Malcolm X,
that's right.
I would say to those that are listening today, let this young man's seeds be the fruit, bear the fruit of our pain and suffering, and let his being put into the earth. Let that Trayvon Martin tree grow in a way that it bears fruit for the benefit of our community and all communities. Then we will have honored him and not just mourn. Thank you so much for joining us today. We will be back next week, same time, same place, here at Busboys and Poets, 9 a.m. to noon on The Rock Newman Show. Thank you, my guests, Leo Alexander and Dr. Julianne Malveaux.
Rock Newman Show. It's The Rock Newman Show.